Most people think that status comes from things, titles, or salaries, but real status isn't borrowed or bought. Let's talk about how to earn real status. Grab your cup of tea and let's dive into it. When you focus on someone's perceived prestige or their consumption, you're missing the deeper currencies at work that may or may not indicate if they have real status. Now, the first point that I want to make is this idea of creating real wealth. This is something that stood out to me when I read the book, The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel, where he talks about the difference between real wealth and perceived wealth, because he highlights that wealth that is real isn't actually displayed. It's usually hidden. It's usually invisible. So when, for example, you see someone who is, say, maybe decked out in designer clothing, or they have all of the latest, fanciest cars, or maybe they live in a big, beautiful house, all this actually indicates, and all you should be interpreting from this, is that they chose to spend their money on those things. They made the decision to consume in a particular way. It doesn't actually, when you look at it through that lens, mean that they are wealthy. And this is where the idea of real wealth can be so much more valuable. This is the wealth that is hidden. This is the wealth that you don't see. So the person that potentially looks like they are seemingly low status could actually be the wealthiest person in the room. But one of the points that Housel really importantly makes as well is that real wealth isn't just financial wealth, it is related to your freedom. So the ability to be able to spend your time however you please. Controlling how you are able to spend your time is what real wealth actually looks like. It's not even about the dollars that you have in your bank account, it is the freedom that you have in your life. So something to think about if you do want to earn real status is to invest before you consume. And by that I don't just mean financially investing. Yes, you might also invest in assets, but this could also be investing in yourself. So how are you investing in developing your skills, for example? Invest before you consume, and this will help you to build your wealth. It will help you to build your real wealth. And also embrace the idea that you don't have to display everything that you have. One of the things that I love to talk about on this channel is this idea of making quiet power moves, of building in silence, that you don't need to announce every move that you're making, every new project, every strategy, every new undertaking, every achievement. Some things you can do in silence. You can move in silence without needing the validation from other people. And speaking of validation, and if you do have that feeling that you need to be validated by others, or if you are constantly comparing yourself to other people, I'm going to be sharing an episode about this and the courage to be disliked coming up soon as well. But this idea of freedom and that being the marker of true wealth is something that has been popular for several decades now, and it was particularly popularized by Tim Ferriss in his book, The 4-Hour Work Week, where he talked about the new rich. So that is my point number 2. It is about joining the new rich. In the book, which has an absolute cult following, Ferriss describes the new rich as having unrestricted mobility. So again, this comes back to them having physical freedom in their life, the ability to do whatever it is that they want to do. And he says, the guard is changing. Being bound to one place will be the new defining feature of the middle class. The new rich are defined by a more elusive power than simple cash, unrestricted mobility. So the new rich aren't hustling at all costs. In case you haven't noticed, there is this real uprising of this anti-hustle culture. So for so many years, this idea of being a boss and hustling no matter what to the point of burnout was this really glamorized concept. But now people are starting to wake up to that not being a sustainable way to live. And also that there are so many people who have seen such amazing success who don't actually live that way, who have put in place systems, processes, teams, for example, that allow them to be able to live a really flexible life while still being able to achieve things that they want to achieve in a much more intentional way. So instead of trying to embrace this hustle at all cost culture, they're actually doing the opposite. They're trying to establish these systems that automate themselves, that look after themselves, so that they don't need to be hustling every minute of the day. They are trying to put these systems into place that allow them to have a more meaningful life and to live a better quality of life as well. And this is something that I've noticed since I moved to a new neighbourhood. I used to live in the city and now I live in a suburb. So you get to pay a little bit more attention to who is out and about when you go on a walk, for example. And what I have noticed is that it's the people who are out in, say, the middle of the day, and they don't seem to be rushing to get to an appointment. They don't seem to be on the clock in a really short lunch break, for example, or racing to get to work by a certain time. They just seem to be the ones that are moving at their own speed. So when you're thinking about earning status, remember that those people are probably the ones with the real status. They're probably the ones who are actually the true power players. They have set up their life in a way that allows them to be able to live that lifestyle. And when hustle culture has made us so accustomed to being in back-to-back meetings, working the longest days that we can imagine, remember that that is real status. That is the freedom to do whatever you want, whenever you want, and still be able to maintain a lifestyle that is also to the standard that you want for yourself as well. So think about what you can learn from these people. If you have access to any of these people, if you know people that seem to fit into that category, then ask them questions. Learn about how it is that they got to that position. Some of the most successful people I know are the people who saw a lifestyle that they admired and they asked a lot of questions to the people that seem to be living that lifestyle. Also think about how you can create these systems. So how can you automate things? How can you create these systems that allow you to have more flexibility and more freedom in your life as well? But it isn't all about your lifestyle either. There is a unique combination of things that contribute to your status. And one of the frameworks that I absolutely love, my point number 3, is the M.I.L.E.S Framework. This was a framework that was proposed in the book The Unfair Advantage by Ash Ali and Hassan Kuba. And they highlight that your unfair advantage is made up of a unique combination of things. So that is your money. And to be clear, that relates to whether you have money or whether you don't, because even if you don't, that could form a part of your unfair advantage. It means that you are more resourceful, for example. It also is your intelligence and your insight, so things like the insider knowledge that you have in a particular industry. It is your location and luck. They also have a really interesting discussion about luck, which I've talked about on this channel before. And I also did a whole other episode on luck as well. And your M.I.L.E.S framework also includes your education and your expertise, and it includes your status. Now, how they define your status here is that your status is almost your personal brand. That is the combination of all of the other elements that contribute to your status. So when you look at that, remember that this is not just about your title or your salaries or the things that you have. They are the things like your intelligence, your education, your expertise that contribute to status that you can earn for yourself. And where I think location is an interesting one, similar to money, is that your location could be part of your advantage. You could be in the best place to be for whatever industry it is that you are a part of. So for example, this might be like being someone in tech and being in Silicon Valley. But what could also still be interesting is if you aren't in the ideal location for whatever it is that you are pursuing, because it could actually mean that you have the opportunity to be a big fish in a smaller market, or you have the opportunity, for example, to think about bringing in an idea that is progressing on a much bigger stage, maybe on the world stage, that hasn't yet progressed in the area that you live in. And you can be at the forefront of that movement, and it's a less competitive space because there aren't so many people who share all of your skills and all of your interests. You can actually be the person who stands out in that space. And when it comes to the education element, remember that this doesn't always need to relate to your formal education. So you could be self-educated, you could be self-directed. You can be the type of person who relentlessly listens to podcasts, who watches YouTube videos, who reads to educate themselves as much as possible, which if you follow this channel, you would know that reading is one of my favorite things to do as much as possible. So if you are thinking about personal branding or your status in an industry, remember that status can come in many forms. It can be earned in many ways. For more on how to join the new rich, then check out my previous episode on this topic. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next episode.